Hello, listeners. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jeff Wetzler, who is the co-CEO of Transcend, a nationally recognized innovation organization and an expert in learning and human potential. Jeff is also the author of Ask, Tap into the Hidden Wisdom of People Around You for Unexpected Breakthroughs in Leadership and Life. His experience spans 25 plus years in business and education as a management consultant to top corporations, a learning facilitator for leaders, and as the Chief Learning Officer at Teach for America. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. What does it truly mean to be a leader? Welcome to The Executive, a podcast that highlights the career journeys, struggles, successes, and day-to-day experiences of leaders. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Ritter, bringing over 10 years of experience as a leadership and career coach, L&D consultant, and healthcare executive. My mission is to guide leaders towards creating a career they can love. Thank you for listening. Now let's hear from the executive. Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I have to tell you, the title of your book, Ask, Tap into the Hidden Wisdom of People Around You for Unexpected Breakthroughs in Leadership and Life. I think it's fully encompasses the number one trait I always recommend people to just focus on as leaders, and that's curiosity.
Yes.
And I feel like you've just fully answered the problem that exists in the world around leadership and trust and such. But first off, hi.
Hello.
Nice
It's so good to be with you.
Yep. I just get excited sometimes. So, okay. Tell me a little bit about what inspired this book and what is the problem that we're solving?
Yeah. Well, the book was inspired, I think, by two things. One is the problem, and two is the possibility of overcoming the problem. But I would say, just to spend a moment on the problem, it is a pervasive problem. And it's one that I have experienced and at times continue to experience in my role as a leader and executive. But it's also a problem I have seen when I've advised people around the world. People encounter, really no matter where I go. And the problem is this: we are all surrounded by people in our lives. Those could be our colleagues, our bosses, the people we manage, our clients and customers, our investors, even our friends and loved ones. And the people in our lives have perspectives. They have ideas. They have feedback for us. They have insights that if we could tap into, if we could find out, we would be far better off together. We would save time. We would avoid repeating mistakes. We would make better decisions. We would innovate better together. We would be closer in our relationships. But so often, far too often, we actually don't find out what the people around us really know, what they really think, what they really feel, because they don't tell us. And so we suffer. We don't get all those benefits. And instead, our decisions are worse, and we waste time, and we make same mistakes again, and we don't improve or raise our game. And so that's the problem. The people around us are not telling us what we really most need to know too often. And go ahead, you want to jump in?
Oh, yeah. But do we really want to know? Because I work with leaders all the time, and they're like, oh, I don't have expectations from my boss. I feel so lost and unsure. And okay, well, seems like there's a very simple solution here. I'm not gonna say it this way, but we're gonna ask some questions to get there. Ask.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're stuck from the ask.
Yeah. So I will say, I can't tell you what you want to know or what you even should want to know, but I can tell you what I think you need to know. And I think more often than not, you're going to be better off if you're aware of what the people around you are experiencing you. If you're aware of what they think might be the fatal flaw in your plan, if you're aware of how your presentations are impacting other people and how they're coming across, if you're aware of the feedback and suggestions and ideas they have. So you don't have to want it. It's up to you. You don't have to go after it. But I have seen over and over again that when you do tap into it, that is where the unexpected breakthroughs do come from. Now, this would not be a problem if you could read people's minds. If you could actually just kind of guess accurately what the other people are thinking and feeling and are not telling you, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But research shows over and over again that we are bad at doing that, and much worse than we actually think at doing that. And some of the most common pieces of conventional wisdom don't work. Things like try to put yourself in their shoes. It turns out it doesn't work because you're not in their shoes. Or try to read their body language. It turns out that doesn't work either because you don't know what's behind that body language. The only thing that is proven to work reliably to really find out what other people think, feel, and know is to ask them the question. But as you say, we don't do that enough. I think it's deceptively hard to do that, and that is what that is what I'm tackling in the book.
Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from a leader that I just know what they think, or I'm really good at reading people. Hold on a
Right.
second. You're actually not, according to statistics. Like there's
That's
some
right.
research behind here. We're pretty bad at
Yes.
that.
And I'll
Uh,
say to people sometimes, did you actually ask them? Are you sure that that's what they think, or that's why they did this, or that's why they're coming from? And people might say, well, I didn't ask them, but I just know, I know for sure. And unfortunately, we can't know for sure. And even if our guess is right that this is what they think about an issue, we have no way of knowing why they think that or where that comes from as well. And sometimes that's the richest source of insight.
mm-hmm. I think the enemy of some level of fulfillment or comfort in life is assumptions.
Yes, exactly.
Um,
We all make them. We have to make them just to get by, but they can get us in trouble.
what prevents us from feeling like we can
Like we can ask.
ask? Yeah.
Yeah. So in my view, there's a few things. One is biggest one is that we actually don't realize there is something to ask about in the first place. To your point about assumptions, the assumptions that we have occur to us as if it's reality. And so when I'm sure where you're coming from or what you're about to do or why you think what you think, or who you are, there is nothing to ask about. I have no level of curiosity. And so questions wouldn't even come to my mind because it wouldn't seem like there's anything I need to know. So that's one of the barriers. A second barrier is that sometimes we don't feel it's our place to ask. And that can be for a lot of different reasons. One of which is that we often overestimate how receptive people would be, or I should say this, we underestimate how receptive people would be to our questions, and we overestimate how intrusive the questions are going to feel. And there's actually research on this too, where people hold back from asking what they think might be sensitive questions, when the other person actually would really welcome the chance to answer them and to talk about themselves and have someone show interest in them. So we hold ourselves back because we say, it's not really my place to ask this question. And sometimes people, depending on the culture they've been in or the society or their roles, are conditioned to think this is not your place to ask a question. Or if I ask a question, it's going to expose my ignorance. And then sometimes we don't ask questions because we just don't have the repertoire of questions. We haven't been trained. One of the reasons I wrote the book is that asking questions is a skill set. And it's not a skill set that most people actually get taught how to do. And so we end up with a very, very narrow repertoire of questions that we know how to ask. And we sometimes go to those over and over again. But there's a huge wealth of questions that we could be asking that we don't even know what they are. And so that's another reason that holds us back.
Assumptions, underestimating the interest, like overestimating what people really don't want to know, and not having the questions, like the words.
Yes.
How to even manage, how to feel comfortable in those situations, even.
Right.
Get the information that you might be interested in. Those are, I can see myself in them. I can see my clients in them. And I think you also had some statistics in terms of how many people like hold something back.
Absolutely.
From people in their life. I'd love to just highlight those for a moment.
Yeah. So this is back to the problem, how pervasive it is that people don't tell us things. There's one landmark study in the field of organizational behavior that talks about, upwards of 85% of managers in organizations across a whole range of industries say, yeah, we don't raise concerns to the people above us at times because we don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. We don't want to be dismissed. We don't want to make them defensive. Just think about that amount of collective intelligence and genius in an organization that gets suppressed. And by the way, those people then said, and 3/4 of the people around us also know about this problem and are not telling the people around them as well. So just like what is known in organizations, throughout the layers, on the front lines, even by customers and stakeholders, that just doesn't get shared. And how powerful would it be if that could get unleashed? But it's not limited to organizations. Even I saw one study in researching the book that said between 60 and 80% of Americans, depending on demographics, withhold information even from their own doctors. Literally information that could be relevant to their health improving. Maybe it's life and death information. Things like, yeah, I'm not really taking that medication that you think I am regularly, or yeah, I'm not exercising, or, I am afraid of the side effects, or my diet is not what you think it is. Any number of different things. They're not telling their doctors. And these are people who could literally help them get better, and they're still withholding. And when asked why are they withholding, they said, well, I don't want the doctor to judge me. I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to waste the doctor's time. I don't want to be a burden. All of these different barriers, but just think about how much doctors are not learning from their very patients.
Wow. So it's this combination of I don't know that there's something that I need to know, as well as I'm afraid of, well, I don't know what I need to know. I'm assuming I know more than I do, and I'm afraid to ask for information that I think I might need.
Yeah, all of it. It's like overdetermined, both the fact that people won't tell us and the fact that we don't ask, which is why the insights, I say, stay hidden.
Wow. Okay, where did this even come from? Because you've been a leader, you've grown within organizations, you've held multiple, variety of different positions and been in different environments.
Yeah.
And so were you applying the Ask framework prior to being the Ask framework, or did you just notice a problem and didn't know how to solve it? Like, I'd love the origin story.
Yeah, so this is part two of my answer to your question of where this came from, which is beyond seeing the problem, I also saw the possibility. I started my career at a very special organization called Monitor Group, a management consulting organization. It's now part of Deloitte. But I spent almost the first decade of my career there. And I had the chance to work with some of the leading thinkers in organizational behavior while I was at Monitor. People like Chris Argyris, who really almost invented the field of organizational behavior and organizational learning. People like David Cantor, who was just a complete pioneer of the field of family systems, and then he transferred that and applied it to teams and how teams communicate. Diana Smith, Jim Cutler, Jamie Higgins, many other people. And these people kind of showed me a lot of the ideas that underlie the Ask approach. And I had the chance while I was there to not only learn these kinds of ideas, but also teach them to consultants and teach them to our clients around the world. And when I saw how powerful they were, people would say things to me like, this is like life-changing. It's not just important in my work, but it's important in my personal life, in my marriage, with my kids, with my brother. And I saw how powerful it was. I just knew I was onto something really important. And I can say it without needing to have any modesty, because the original ideas were not mine. I just had the opportunity to learn them and teach them to other people. And then after about a decade, I said, I want to put this to the test myself. I don't want to just be on the sidelines coaching and teaching other people. I actually want to be in the arena, on the field, running something. And so I left Monitor and I took on an executive leadership role at an organization called Teach for America, where I was responsible for the training and performance of thousands of teachers across the country. And I had a team of several hundred, and I was had to very quickly come up to speed in this new industry in education. And truly, if not for the power of these tools and ideas, I would have just been, spit out and ejected from this other organization. But these tools and ideas really helped me to very quickly learn from other people, tap into their expertise. But I also saw the limitations as well. And sometimes I ran into situations where I wasn't learning from other people. Like there was one example where our team was responsible for this massive training one summer, and we were doing these institutes all over the country, and one of the institutes nearly collapsed right at the last minute, and I was completely unaware of it all year long, despite the fact that the team had been struggling, and they had been telling me, oh, it's going fine, a few bumps, whatever, but right at the last minute, the entire thing almost imploded. Thankfully, we had an incredibly heroic leader who stepped in and saved the day, but I was asking myself, why didn't they tell me the truth all year long? Why weren't they actually telling me this? And what I realized is that the tools I learned at Monitor were necessary but insufficient. they didn't yet account for issues of power dynamics and issues of differences in race and gender and other identity markers. And so I had to start incorporating those dimensions, and particularly the dimension of psychological safety, into the set of toolkit, the toolkit itself. And so the ask approach started to kind of refine and evolve and take shape over the course of these different experiences. After about 10 years at Teach for America, I launched my own organization together with a colleague, Elon Samoa, and we've been co-CEOs of the organization for nearly a decade now. It's called Transcend, and it's an innovation organization. We work with communities all across the country doing this kind of work. And these tools have served me as an entrepreneur, building an organization of 100 plus people, raising millions and millions of dollars from investors. And I've continued to see the power of those ideas. But at the same time, I've also continued to refine those ideas. And we have really, in the course of Transcend, tapped into what is the hidden wisdom in communities where the answers lie in the people on the front lines as well. So all of that has kind of come together into this methodology called the Ask approach.
It sounds like the core and the foundation thing you just highlighted is also it's like what is at the core of your impact at Transcend itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. At Transcend, we believe that the most important insights for innovation cannot be imposed upon a team or an organization or a community, but reside inside of them. And that the role of the leader is to create the conditions for that genius to emerge so that communities and teams and organizations can reach their wildest dreams.
Wow. You often tell leaders to not turn away from the moments where they struggled, because they can highlight things that are really important to you. And if you're at an organization that almost implodes because there didn't seem to be the level of trust or information that you needed, I can see how that might highlight the importance of ask. And
Exactly. One of the things I talk about in the book is that one of the most important roles that a CEO or team leader or division leader or entrepreneur can play in their organization is being the learner in chief. The learner in chief is the one who sets the tone for learning in the organizations. And part of what that means, to your point, is actually saying to the team, and I've since learned how to do this, and it makes a huge difference, to say, here's the mistake I made. Here's the thing I was wrestling with, and I would have handled it differently next time. And here's what I regret. And by the way, here's the assumption I was making that caused me to make that mistake. And here's the thing that caused me to make that assumption in the first place. And when leaders can do that in front of their teams, especially publicly, it sends the message to other people, you can do that too. You can admit your mistakes. You can ask for help. You can invite ideas from other people. And that's when the genius starts to emerge in a team and organization.
Sure. I was reflecting on of how I lead and how I ask, and how even
Tell me, what were your
questions are at the
reflections?
core. Well, there was this one moment. I was actually the head of talent development at a life sciences manufacturer, and I had a small team, and I did a lot of engagement activities. We built values. We built a crest. We had kind of like spirit animals, like icons, and it seemed to be that there was so much trust and camaraderie. And one of the things I asked them is, look, we're a small team. If you're looking to go elsewhere, please just share. Just please share. We want to make a good soft like offboarding for you, but there's a lot of work that we're doing. Some of us have to travel in to do the work itself, the training and the facilitation, etc. Just bring it to me. Let me know. And I had one individual that just started disengaging and like wasn't doing the work in the shared documents, wasn't responding, and it's like, okay, something's up, something's wrong. Try to follow up and connect, ask questions, and lo and behold, without even saying anything, the person dropped everything, didn't show up to a facilitation, bowed out, and left. And it was actually painful as a leader. Yeah, it was really rough to say, like, what could I have done differently in that situation to have created a safer space for that person to feel comfortable sharing with me the fact that they were thinking of leaving, and that so we could have made it better for them so they didn't have to sit in their own heads, and also better for our team and myself and the company.
Yes. Did you have any reflections or insights or learnings on that really good question?
Hmm. Not yet. Maybe after you share some of the solutions.
It's tough when somebody ups and leaves. And of course, when it's possible, and I had somebody on my team recently also leave, and leave sooner and more um, unexpectedly than I would have liked or would have realized. And it's always painful for everybody all around. One of my insights in that experience at the end, well, one of the things I try to do when possible, I don't know whether you had the opportunity or could still have the opportunity to this, is to do some kind of exit interview reflection, which is essentially a set of questions to say, I'm not going to try to change your mind. I'm not going to try to, punish you for what you have to say. I truly, humbly, genuinely want to learn and need to learn, and anything you can share with me would be a gift to me and my team. Um, and when doing that, I was then able to say to this person, "What was your experience?" And ultimately kind of walk me through your thought process that led you to to conclude that this was the right decision. And what I realized is that she had told me a couple of times, I'm not totally feeling like I'm connecting to other people in the team and the organization. And it's not a big deal. I just want to kind of put that on your radar and alert you. And I was thinking to myself at the time, this is like a 3 out of 10. They're just kind of, little, challenges or whatever. But for them, it was like an 8 or 9 out of 10. And one of my lessons learned in hindsight was not only to check in with people, how's it going, but if they do share a challenge, to ask them to calibrate that challenge, and to even potentially say, like, if is this like, low, medium, hot in terms, or whatever number, 1 out of 10, 10 out of 10, or that kind of thing, because what I could assume is not necessarily what's going on for them in their experience as well. And so, if you have the chance to do some kind of post after the fact conversation, to just ask them to share with you, what was your experience and how did you experience me and other people on the team, and what might we have done differently that could have made a difference for you, um, that can be helpful. I don't know. Did you have that opportunity, or do you have that opportunity?
Yeah, for some further context, and thank you for sharing your own story too.
Yeah.
There were multiple signs that the way a project was being handled was very disengaging for this individual. And so there were, other than the work not being completed, I was in those meetings to try to assist and push things forwards once I noticed that there was kind of a block. Because I was
Yeah.
working with some of our executives on a project and noticed that they were basically taking away all autonomy, weren't listening to him. It was a very disengaging activity.
Yes.
And to your point though, I didn't go calibrate. I said, look, to me it's like you just do what the CEO says. Like you might not be happy, but you enjoy the work you're doing. The product is basically for them. And so I had a different perception and mindset around the work. To me, this was like, okay, this is frustrating. It's like a 3 out of 10. For this individual, it was like, I'm out.
Yeah.
This is a 12 out of 10. This is not at all what I want to be a part of. I don't agree with this at all. I feel disrespected and underutilized, and I'm not even going to talk to my manager about this, even though I'm kind of like hinting at it through my actions. And I even had conversations with the employee about, yeah, this is not okay. This is not working. Let's just figure out a way to be resilient over this next month and get this project out there. And instead, there was a whole different conversation happening in that individual's head. And so that calibration piece is so important. I'm going to take that with me and bring it out when needed to be like, okay, 0 out of 10. 10 being like, this is terrible. I don't want to do this type of work. 0 being
Yes.
like, normal every day. Where do
Yeah.
you land on this?
Yes. Yes. And then if it's somewhere south of 5, or even maybe south of 7, let's unpack that. What's going on? What's hard? And when someone's asking you to do this and you're not doing this, what's getting in the way for you? And to truly try to unpack what are the challenges, and to assume that somebody's wants to do a good job, but they're just struggling with something that they may not be saying, and to really to try to unearth that, ideally in the spirit of resolving it together.
Mm-hmm. Now, prefacing this with, if that individual made the decision mentally to not try to work towards a solution, as even because even as a coach, you need your client to be bought into the outcome. So
Totally.
creating that safe space for them to work through this, to potentially try to find a place where they can be happier in your company, then great. But if that person already made the decision that they wanted to be checked out, generally what I see is people just making reasons, buying into those reasons, committing to them to reach their goal. I think as a leader, my job would have been to interrupt before they made that commitment.
Yes, yes, yes. And also if they, I think directly asking to what extent do you want to succeed in this, in this project or in this work? And if they say, I'm not that interested, then that tells you something. You could still then go further and say, tell me how come that you're not interested in it. Maybe there's something to discover there. But if they say, no, I actually want to be helpful. I want to do a good job. Then you can say, well, here's what we're seeing. So let's dig into this together.
Yeah, and for any leader that's listening and says, that's not my job, it's their job to want to do their work, well, guess who had to do his work when he left?
Exactly.
Me.
Exactly.
for many sleepless nights.
This is what I call the pay now or pay later plan. You can pay now and have the conversation, or you can pay later if you don't find out what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because that position wasn't backfilled, and so I was doing pretty much all that work afterwards.
Right.
So,
It's painful.
yeah. Okay. So someone's thinking to themselves, great concepts, everyone. Now, what can I do tomorrow? Is there some sort of change or action they can take?
Yeah. So it might make sense for me just to take a moment and walk you through the ask approach, which is essentially the kind of the 5 practices that, if you put them together, can give you the greatest chance of truly learning what's going on with someone. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are their ideas? And any one of these practices, I would say, could give rise to immediate things that you can do tomorrow, but it might help to just sort of lay them out together. How does that sound?
That sounds amazing.
Okay, cool. So number 1 is called choose curiosity. And you and I were talking about this a little bit before we started the podcast, but curiosity is at the root of all of this. You can't ask questions in a genuine way if you're not genuinely curious. And on the flip side, when we are truly curious, it radiates out. The other person can tell. It makes them want to share with us. And there is, I believe that curiosity is not just a trait that some people have and other people don't have. It's not just kind of a state of mind that we're in or a mood that we're in sometimes. I truly believe it's a choice, which means it's a decision that is always available to us. And when we choose curiosity, what we're doing is we're really centering in our minds one single question, which is, what can I learn from this person? Or if we're already talking to them, what more can I learn from this person? And when we center that question in our minds, first of all, it reminds us that there is something to learn from every single person. But that question also starts to push away other things like, why are they such a jerk? Or how do I get them to see what I see? Or how come they're so wrong all the time? Or how do I get out of here? Or whatever it is. If we just really center that question, what can I learn from this person? Then all of a sudden, other questions start to occur to us. Like, well, what do they see that I don't see? What experience might they have that I need to know about? What ideas do they have? How are they experiencing me? What impact do I have? What suggestions might they have? All kinds of things start to occur to us when we center this question, what can I learn from this person? So that's number 1. I would say if you want to do something tomorrow, just ask yourself that question, especially if you're with somebody who you might not think you have anything to learn from, or it might seem like someone you disagree with or the other. Just ask, what can I learn from this person? The second thing I call make it safe, which is a recognition that even if there is something important to learn from someone, they've got to feel safe in order for them to actually tell it to you. If they feel intimidated, if they feel threatened, if they worry that you're going to fire them or that your relationship's in jeopardy, they're not going to really tell you their truth, especially if it's a hard truth. So making it safe is really about lowering those barriers, making it more comfortable, easier, more appealing for them to share with you. And there's a number of ways you can do this. One of them is about creating connection. And of course, the best time to create connection with someone is well before you actually want to have a hard conversation. You want to learn from them so that there's a level of trust already there. But even in the moment, it turns out that where you create and how you create connection makes a huge difference. So for this book, I talked with CEOs. iconic CEOs, like CEOs of organizations like Kraft or Medtronic. And I said to them, CEOs are notorious for not getting the truth from people. People lie to CEOs because they want to look good and they want to make the CEO think that they're, that things are on track and going well. And so I said to the CEOs, how did you get the truth out of people, especially people multiple layers away from you? And they said, well, the first thing is, if I ever want the truth out of someone, I'm never going to invite them to the CEO office or make them sit across the big CEO desk from me and assume they're not going to feel intimidated. I am going to go where they want to go. We're going to have lunch together. We're going to go to the cafeteria. I'm going to go on a sales call. We're going to ride along. We're going to take a walk, whatever it is. And there was no single answer other than the answer of, I need to do it where the other person feels most comfortable, not where I do. So that's something to think about. It's like where, when, how is going to be most comfortable for the other person, and give yourself enough time for the conversation. But also part of making it safe is telling them why you're asking. It's not just making them guess what your agenda is and hold your cards close to the vest and just fire off questions, but it's to say to them, look, I'm stuck also. And I want this to work, but I'm not sure what we need, what to do here. And the more vulnerable you can be in opening up, the more safe they're going to feel in sharing with you. And then part of opening up is also what I call radiating resilience. And that's demonstrating to the other person that whatever they say to you, you can handle it. You're not going to crumble. It might sound like saying something like, hey, if I were in your shoes, I might be feeling kind of frustrated or overwhelmed or even annoyed. And whatever it is, I would totally get it. And I would love to hear it so that we can talk about it. Something like that lets them know it's discussable. That you're not, that if they're feeling those kinds of things, you're not gonna crumble or blame them, even if you have a reaction to it. So all of that is about making it safe, and that's step number 2. Step number 3 is is the heart of the ask approach, and I call it pose quality questions. The definition of a quality question is very simple. It's a question that helps us learn something important from the other person. And many of us say things that have question marks at the end, or even ask questions that are not quality questions. I call those crummy questions. So much of what passes for questions, I think, are really crummy questions. These could be leading questions, like a lawyer would ask somebody, trying to get them to admit that they're wrong. They could be sneaky questions. They could be clumsy questions, like if you're asked someone 3 questions in a row and they don't know which question to answer, or you say what you think and then you say, isn't that right? And then they don't really know how to tell you, no, that's not right. Or even attack questions like, why the hell would you do that? So all kinds of things are not quality questions. Quality questions help us learn something important. And so there's a whole taxonomy of quality questions that almost no one's ever actually taught what these questions are. I almost think of it the same way I think a surgeon would look at their tools, like their scalpel and all their other tools. Use a different tool depending on what you're trying to get at. Same thing for a question. Use a different question depending on what you're trying to learn. One example of, I think, a very underutilized quality question is a strategy I call request reactions. And that's simply to say to the other person, hey, here's what I'm thinking, or here's what I'd like you to do, or here's my feedback. And then pause and just ask them, what's your reaction to that? How did that land with you? How does that strike you? How does that sit with you? What does that make you think? What might I be missing? Any of those kinds of questions are examples of requesting reactions. And I think so often we assume that if someone has a reaction, they're going to tell us their reaction. But for all the reasons why they don't necessarily feel safe, they're not necessarily going to tell you their reaction. They may not even realize you want to know their reaction. So if you want to know how your comments and your points and your feedback are landing with someone, you got to request their reactions. That's just one of, let's say, a dozen strategies that we can very easily try out and master to learn far more in terms of posing quality questions. The number 4 is what happens after you ask the question all comes down to how you listen to the answer. So number 4 is called listen to learn. And listening to learn is really about hearing the most essential things that someone's trying to tell you, whether they say it out loud or whether they don't say it out loud. And it's important that we are listening not just for the content of what someone has to say, but also for the emotion. Sometimes the emotion is more important than the content, and also for the actions that they're taking. Are they repeating themselves? Are they pushing back? Are they offering help? Are they disengaging? Those are all different kinds of actions that people take. And so if you could train yourself to listen for the content and the emotions and the actions, you triple the amount of information that you hear from someone. Just the same way that I think a music aficionado can train themselves to listen to the percussion and listen to the harmony and listen to the vocals. And all of a sudden, it's a much richer piece of music. We can do the same thing by listening to other people. And I'll just say if there's one kind of technique to leave you with as it relates to listening that I would say anybody could immediately try and it will have profound effects is this strategy called paraphrase and test. And so that's just simply if someone's telling you something, before you answer, just say to them, hey, let me just check if I'm following you. This is what I think I heard you say. Is that right? Or what would you modify to my takeaway? And just that little move of stopping and repeating back what you think you heard them say in your own words, and then asking them, did I get it right? Has so many benefits. First of all, it helps you know, did you actually hear them correctly? And I will say 50% of the time when I do this, someone will say, it's not exactly what I meant, or that is what I said, but now that you say it back to me, there's more to it. So you get better information. You also slow down the conversation, especially if it's getting tense or heated. By paraphrasing and testing, you just change the tempo of the conversation. You give everyone a chance to take a breath. But it also sends the message to the other person, I really care about what you have to say. It is important enough to me that I'm going to use my own time, my own words to say it back to you, and you check with them. So that's one small strategy among many in this part of the book around listening that I think anyone can do. It makes a huge difference. Then finally, the fifth part of the ask approach is called reflect and reconnect. And this is basically to say, once we hear what they have to say, how do we process it? How do we make meaning of it? Reflection is what allows us to convert our experiences into insight and our insight into action. And sometimes people think reflection, I don't have time for reflection. It sounds too mysterious or esoteric, but it's very simple. To reflect on what someone told us, we just have to sift it and turn it. So to sift it, we just say, of all the things that they told me, what are the top 2 or 3 things that are most important? We can look back at our notes. We can review the transcript. We can ask a friend who was there. It's good to have a friend help you so you don't sift out the wrong things. And then you just turn it over in your mind 3 times. You say the first turn is, from what they said, how does that affect my story? Maybe I realized that they have a point, or that they were up against something I didn't realize, or that I was right in this situation. But how does it affect my story of what's going on? The second turn is, how does it affect the steps that I should take? Maybe I should double down on my position. Maybe I should apologize. Maybe I should bring in more help. Maybe I should somehow, change up my approach, but think through your steps. And then the third is the deepest, which is, how does it shed light on my stuff? Maybe it reveals an assumption I was making, or a bias I have, or some way that I show up in the world, that I can tweak if I want to not have the same thing happen over and over again. So reflect on your story, your steps, your stuff. And that's it. Sift it and turn it. And I call this step reflect and reconnect because it's not just enough to take away this insight for yourself. It's important to go back to the other person and say, thank you. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the risk that you took. Here's what I took away. Here's how I'm going to grow from that. Here's what I'm going to do about it. And that closing of the loop with the other person is so rare and so powerful, but it lets them know they didn't waste their time. It lets them know how much you value them. And I think it radically increases the chances that they're going to want to share with you again in the future. So that's a quick overview of the ask approach. I'll just pause there.
Wow. I mean, that quick overview and just listening to the tips that you're giving, I'm like, if anyone took one thing away from this and started implementing it, they would see an incredible impact on their team and the trust of the people around them, the information that they're getting. And I mean, what a fun preview. Everyone go get the book, Ask by Jeff Wetzler. And if our audience wanted to maybe follow more of your journey other than just to go get the book, where should they go?
There's a number of places that they can go. They can go, probably the best place is the website, www.askapproach.com. There are tools and resources and frameworks and a bunch of things. There's also a diagnostic assessment where you can actually test yourself on the 5 steps, see how good you are at learning from other people and which of the steps you're already strong in and which ones you can grow in as well. That's totally free. I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. So just connect with me, Jeff Wetzler, on LinkedIn. You can follow on Instagram, Ask Approach as well.
Oh, okay. Lots of to-dos for our audience. Go out there, get the book, leave a review, go to Jeff's LinkedIn, hit connect, let him know that you heard him here. Maybe ask him a question. I don't know if you have the time to respond to everyone, but ask anyways. Check out his website. And Jeff, thank you. I could keep asking you questions, but I know that we're limited on time. And I just wanted to just re-emphasize how important what the information Jeff shared is for your growth as a leader and even just in your personal life. So thank you again, Jeff.
Thank you. So great to be with you.
Thank you for listening to the Executive Podcast, where we explore what it truly means to be a leader. If you've taken one thing away, make sure to subscribe, share, and most importantly, leave a review. Thanks again, everyone, and see you next time.